The guards thought the prisoners were asleep. They were wrong. Inside the beds were fake heads, made from soap, paint, cotton sheets, and real human hair. Behind one of the beds was a hole in the wall. 3 men had vanished from Alcatraz. And by the time anyone understood what had happened, they were already gone. 3 men escaped the most secure prison in America. That is a fact. What happened after that is the mystery.
Alcatraz sat in the middle of San Francisco Bay. Cold water, strong currents, no easy shoreline, no road out, no room for mistakes. It was built to feel impossible. And that is exactly why what they did shocked everyone. The man behind the escape was Frank Morris. By the time he reached Alcatraz, he had already spent most of his life in institutions. He had escaped before, more than once. He was the kind of prisoner guards never stopped watching. Working beside him were 2 brothers, John and Clarence Anglin. They were different from Morris. They were strong swimmers, men who had grown up around cold water long before Alcatraz ever became part of their lives. So now the question was not just whether they could get out. The question was whether these 3 men could do what nobody else had ever done. For 6 months, Morris and the Anglins worked in secret, right under the guards' noses. They used stolen spoons, saw blades, and even a vacuum cleaner motor turned into a drill. Night after night, they widened the wall behind their sinks. They covered the work with painted cardboard. And when the noise got too loud, Morris used his accordion to hide it during music hour. Every night, the hole got a little bigger. A prison wall, broken inch by inch. And behind it was something even better.
Behind the wall was an unguarded utility corridor, a space the guards never saw, a space that became their hiding place. And above that, they built a secret workshop. What they made there sounds almost impossible. A life raft. Not from wood, not from cloth, from prison raincoats. More than 50 of them. They stitched them together by hand, sealed every seam, built matching life vests, and even made wooden paddles. A prison break stitched together from raincoats. That is not just planning, that is obsession. And it meant one thing. They were no longer dreaming about escape, they were ready for it. On the night of June 11th, 1962, everything changed. At 9:37 p.m., Morris went to check on one of the Anglin brothers, but the brothers were already gone. Alan West, the 4th man in the plan, got stuck behind a jammed vent and never made it out. So Morris kept going. The Anglins kept going. They climbed through the holes they had spent months creating, up to the roof, across the prison, down the drain pipe at the rear, and over the fence. Then they disappeared into the darkness toward the water. And this is where most people think the story ends. It does not. Because Alcatraz did not realize the men were gone until morning.
At 7:15 the next morning, the prison finally found out. The beds still looked full. The guards saw sleeping faces, but they were not real. When the blankets were pulled back, the fake heads were still there. Soap, paint, cotton sheets, human hair. The prisoners themselves were gone. The island went into lockdown. Boats searched the bay. Helicopters swept the shoreline. Officers combed the water. But the first clues only made the mystery worse. A wooden paddle was found. Then letters sealed in rubber. Then a homemade life vest washed ashore at Cronkite Beach. No bodies, no prisoners. No clean answer. Just pieces. And pieces are never as comforting as the truth. The FBI had a reason to believe the worst. The bay was cold. The currents were brutal. And June water in San Francisco Bay could sit in the mid-50s. That is enough to break down even a strong swimmer fast. And if the raft launched at the wrong time, the tide could drag it west toward the Golden Gate instead of towards safety. For years, investigators followed every lead, every tip, every rumor, every claim. In 1979, the FBI officially closed the case. The official conclusion was that the men likely drowned. But official is not the same as certain. If they drowned, why was there never a body?
For 50 years, the case stayed cold. Then, a letter arrived. It claimed to be from John Anglin. It ended with one chilling line. We all made it that night, but barely. The FBI tested it. The handwriting, the fingerprints, the DNA. Nothing conclusive. Then a photo surfaced years later that allegedly showed the Anglin brothers in Brazil. Still disputed, still unverified. Still enough to keep the mystery alive. And that is where this case becomes almost impossible to settle. Because the evidence does not point in one direction. It points in two. Years later, scientists modeled the bay, and they found something important. Timing mattered. If the raft launched around 10 p.m., the outgoing tide could push it west, straight toward the Golden Gate. But a later launch, around 11:30 p.m., could change the route entirely. That could mean debris drifting elsewhere. That could mean a very different outcome. So even the water refuses to give a clean answer. And that is why this escape still matters. Not because it happened. That part is certain. It matters because nobody can agree on what happened next.
Frank Morris would be an old man now. John Anglin would be an old man now. Clarence Anglin would be an old man now. If they drowned, Alcatraz kept its secret. If they survived, they pulled off the greatest prison escape in American history. Either way, 3 men escaped the most secure prison in America. The only question is whether they escaped the bay. That is the real story. Not how they got out, but whether they got away.